On the evening of November 4th, 2025, the sky over Louisville, Kentucky, glowed with the deep orange of a setting sun as the rhythmic sound of aircraft engines echoed across the city. Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport, home to one of the busiest air cargo hubs in the world, was in full swing. UPS Worldport, the heart of global logistics, processed thousands of parcels per minute, its runways alive with aircraft landing and taking off in precise coordination. Among those operations was UPS Airlines Flight 2976, a McDonnell Douglas MD-11F cargo jet scheduled for departure to Honolulu, Hawaii. It was a routine flight, one the experienced crew had flown countless times before. The crew consisted of 3 UPS pilots, all veterans of the cargo airline industry, trained in handling one of the most powerful and complex aircraft in commercial service. As the clock neared 5:13 p.m. Eastern Time, the aircraft stood on runway 17R, engines humming steadily, cleared for takeoff. The city beyond the airport perimeter was calm. Workers in nearby factories were finishing their shifts, unaware that in a few moments, the quiet routine of the evening would turn into chaos. As Flight 2976 accelerated down the runway, its 3 engines roared in unison. The MD-11F lifted off gracefully, climbing into the dusky sky. For the first few seconds, everything appeared normal. But witnesses along the highway adjacent to the airport soon noticed something wrong. A streak of fire trailed from the aircraft's left wing. Within seconds, the engine appeared to sputter, then erupt in a burst of flames. The aircraft, still climbing, began to tilt slightly to the left. In the control tower, air traffic controllers exchanged urgent words, their radar screens showing the aircraft's altitude stalling below 200 feet. The pilots likely sensed the violent vibrations of structural failure. In the cockpit, alarms would have blared, a master caution light flashing red, an engine fire warning sounding through the headset. They had mere seconds to respond. The captain and first officer would have initiated emergency procedures, attempting to shut down the affected engine, but the damage was already beyond control. Eyewitnesses said the aircraft shuddered, banked steeply, and then descended rapidly toward the ground. A loud explosion followed as the MD-11 struck an industrial complex located just outside the airport's southern boundary. The impact created an enormous fireball that illuminated the evening sky. Windows shattered for blocks. The aircraft's fuselage broke apart, and burning fuel spread across the industrial park. One of the factories, a petroleum recycling facility, was instantly engulfed in flames. The resulting inferno sent a column of black smoke spiraling hundreds of feet into the air. Within minutes, emergency calls flooded the 911 dispatch center. Louisville Fire and Rescue, local police, and the airport's emergency response units were dispatched. The first units to arrive encountered walls of fire, intense heat, and secondary explosions from ruptured fuel tanks and ignited chemicals. At 5:16 p.m., the airport declared a full emergency. All runways were closed. Sirens wailed across the city as more fire engines converged on the scene. Inside the industrial zone, workers tried to flee as debris continued to rain down. Some were trapped under collapsed structures. The emergency crews quickly realized the scale of the disaster. A major cargo jet had gone down less than half a mile from the end of the runway, crashing directly into occupied buildings. Thick smoke reduced visibility, and the risk of toxic fumes forced authorities to issue a shelter-in-place order for nearby neighborhoods. Residents were told to stay indoors, seal their windows, and avoid the area entirely. The scene resembled a war zone, flames still leaping from twisted metal, the remains of shipping containers and aircraft components scattered over a vast area. By 6 p.m., the fire was partially under control, but the toll was becoming clear. All 3 crew members aboard Flight 2976 had perished in the crash. On the ground, multiple people were dead and others severely injured. Initial reports listed 7 fatalities and 11 injuries, though officials warned that those numbers could rise as rescuers continued to search the wreckage. The Louisville Metro Police Department cordoned off the crash area, while local hospitals activated mass casualty protocols. Ambulances shuttled between the site and University Hospital, where burn units were prepared for an influx of patients. Smoke continued to rise through the night as fire crews worked tirelessly to extinguish hotspots. The city's skyline glowed red under the haze of burning jet fuel. As news of the crash spread, television networks broke into regular programming to broadcast live footage. The sight of the burning wreckage near one of America's largest logistics hubs shocked viewers across the country. Louisville's mayor, Craig Greenberg, arrived at the scene and described it as a moment of unimaginable tragedy. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear addressed the media later that evening, confirming the loss of life and commending the emergency responders who had risked their lives to save others. "If you've seen the footage," he said, "you know how violent this crash was. Our thoughts are with the families of those we lost." Meanwhile, UPS released a statement expressing deep sorrow over the event. "We are heartbroken to confirm that UPS Flight 2976, an MD-11 cargo aircraft en route from Louisville to Honolulu, was involved in an accident shortly after takeoff. We are cooperating fully with authorities as we seek to understand what happened." Through the night, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, began arriving at the site. The NTSB dispatched a GO team of specialists in airframe, power plant, operations, and human performance. Their task was immense: recover the flight data recorder, locate the cockpit voice recorder, and document every fragment of the wreckage. The charred remains of the MD-11 were scattered across several hundred meters, mixed with debris from destroyed industrial buildings. Early reports from witnesses and video evidence suggested a catastrophic failure of the left engine shortly after takeoff, possibly involving separation from the wing. The MD-11, a tri-jet design, is notoriously difficult to handle during engine failures, especially at low altitude. If one engine detaches, the sudden imbalance in thrust and loss of aerodynamic symmetry can make recovery nearly impossible. As dawn broke on November 5th, the scene was grim. Heavy equipment worked to remove rubble, while forensic teams searched for remains and evidence. UPS's massive Worldport hub, located within the airport complex, had suspended operations overnight. The disruption rippled through the global logistics network. Hundreds of flights delayed or canceled, thousands of packages held in limbo. Workers at the facility stood in silence as a company-wide moment of remembrance was observed for the lost crew. Across Louisville, vigils were held, candles flickering in the cold morning air as residents paid tribute to those killed in the crash. Preliminary data indicated that the aircraft had reached only 175 feet of altitude before losing lift. Its ground speed peaked at approximately 186 knots, consistent with early climb-out. The engine failure may have caused an asymmetric thrust situation, leading to uncontrollable roll and yaw. Video footage from nearby highways appeared to confirm flames erupting from the left wing seconds before impact. Investigators found engine fragments along the departure path, supporting the hypothesis of engine separation. Maintenance records for the aircraft showed that it had undergone standard inspection procedures just 2 weeks prior. The MD-11F, though aging, remained a workhorse in the UPS fleet, known for its large cargo capacity and long range. In Washington, D.C., the NTSB held a briefing, announcing that recovery of the flight recorders was underway and that a preliminary report would be issued within 30 days. They cautioned against speculation, but acknowledged that structural or mechanical failure appeared likely. The investigation would examine the aircraft's maintenance history, engine performance data, and any evidence of material fatigue. Attention would also focus on whether the engine pylon assembly had experienced stress cracks or metal fatigue, issues that have occasionally plagued older aircraft. The FAA announced a temporary advisory for all U.S. registered MD-11 operators to conduct visual inspections of engine mounts and pylon structures. In the days following the crash, the community around the airport began to recover from the shock. The area hit by the aircraft remained cordoned off, a landscape of twisted metal, scorched earth, and the skeletal remains of warehouses. Residents recounted the terrifying moments when the sky lit up and debris fell from above. Many described feeling the shockwave from the explosion miles away. The families of the victims gathered in grief, supported by UPS representatives and counselors. For the company, the loss was both personal and symbolic. 3 of its own had died while carrying out their duties at the heart of its global network. UPS pledged financial assistance and full support for the victims' families and announced a scholarship fund in honor of the crew. From a technical perspective, aviation experts began analyzing the event in the context of previous MD-11 accidents. The aircraft type, though widely used in cargo operations, has a complex flight control system and a history of stability issues during takeoff and landing. Investigators drew parallels to earlier incidents involving structural stress during climb-out. The central question: had this particular aircraft suffered an undetected mechanical flaw, or had an unforeseen external factor triggered the catastrophe? Some speculated about a possible bird strike or foreign object ingestion, while others pointed to potential fatigue in the engine's pylon assembly. Whatever the cause, the violence of the breakup and the short interval between takeoff and impact pointed to a catastrophic structural failure. The emotional toll extended far beyond Louisville. Across the aviation community, pilots, engineers, and industry professionals mourned the loss. As investigators pieced together the wreckage, they began reconstructing the final moments of Flight 2976. Data from the flight recorders, once recovered, would reveal the precise sequence: engine performance, control inputs, and cockpit communication. The cockpit voice recorder would capture the pilot's final words, their attempts to manage the unfolding emergency. The wreckage pattern suggested the aircraft struck the ground nose first at a high rate of descent. The impact forces were unsurvivable. Parts of the fuselage were found embedded deep in concrete foundations, while one of the landing gears lay several hundred meters away, testament to the sheer energy of the crash. In the weeks that followed, federal agencies coordinated environmental cleanup, given the spillage of jet fuel and industrial chemicals. Local businesses affected by the blast began rebuilding. Insurance claims reached into the tens of millions, covering structural damage, cargo loss, and property destruction. Legal experts debated liability, whether mechanical failure absolved the airline or whether third-party maintenance contractors bore some responsibility. UPS faced scrutiny, but regulators emphasized that cargo carriers generally maintain strong safety records. The NTSB's investigation, impartial and meticulous, would ultimately determine causation. Months later, when the preliminary report was released, it confirmed key findings. The left engine had separated due to failure in the pylon mount assembly, initiating an immediate loss of lift and control. The pilots attempted to execute emergency procedures, but at their low altitude, recovery was physically impossible. The report noted that despite the tragedy, the crew's professionalism in the final seconds may have prevented even greater loss of life, as their efforts to steer away from densely populated residential areas limited the damage to industrial zones. The legacy of Flight 2976 became one of loss and learning. For the residents of Louisville, the memory remains vivid. The sound of engines that evening, the sudden explosion, the panic, and the overwhelming response of firefighters and paramedics. For the families of the victims, grief slowly turned into resolve to ensure such an accident would never happen again. The NTSB's final recommendations emphasized the critical importance of rigorous inspection regimes and situational awareness during takeoff emergencies. The FAA adopted the findings, enforcing stricter inspection intervals for engine pylons on older aircraft. Even as operations resumed at UPS Worldport, the sense of loss lingered. Cargo jets continued to take off and land each night, their engines echoing through the city. But for those who witnessed that night in November 2025, the sound carried a different weight. It was a reminder of fragility, of courage, and of the thin line separating routine from catastrophe. The tragedy of UPS Flight 2976 stands as one of the darkest chapters in the history of Louisville's aviation industry, a moment when an ordinary flight became an extraordinary loss. And yet, amid the devastation, there was resilience. Firefighters, paramedics, investigators, and community volunteers worked side by side to restore safety and order. Their actions that night saved countless others. The investigation, though technical in nature, was at its core a story about humanity, the relentless pursuit of truth, the desire to understand, and the hope that from tragedy, lessons can emerge. As Louisville healed, so did the aviation community, determined to make the skies safer for all who take to them.